Hello there, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Liam's Fight Night Picks over here on the JFT YouTube channel. It's finally here. Should have happened 2.5 years ago. Do we want to see it? I've got the man most locked into this fight out of anyone I know. It's the boxing shrew himself, Rob. How are we doing, my friends?
Yeah, good man. Thanks so much for having me. Sorry, I've got to make a confession here. I was a bit flaky the other week when I Liam, and I weren't very well, so I owed you one.
It's all good, mate. Things happen, but hey, if there was ever an apt fight to get you on for, it's this one. Anyone that follows Rob on X will know his vociferous love, shall we say, for Connor Benn and his egg excuse. But we'll come on to Connor Benn later. Look, it's a good card on Saturday from Spurs. I mean, I've heard different things being said of it's good for a UK card, but it's not good by Turkey standards. Whatever that means. For me, this is a solid card. Yes, I'd rather not be seeing Anthony Yards and Lyndon Arth for the third time. But there's other fights on here that are intriguing. And what you've got to remember with stadium fights, which I think people forget, so much budget goes on the stadium fee in the main event that there isn't as much ability to pad a card out as you might see at an O2 Arena, Manchester Arena, etc., isn't there?
Yeah, completely agree. It's come up a few times on a few of these podcasts about how spoilt we've been the last 2 years, really, with some of the certainly the cards that are based in Saudi, and a couple of the cards that they've put on here and in the States. And I agree. I think if you'd asked us 3-4 years ago, look at this card, what do you think? We'd have been like, wow. Yes, it's only a five fights, I think, 5-fight card.
5 fights, yeah.
But given the stadium and the curfew thing, I don't mind it. I don't mind it at all. We'll get into the main event in a minute, but I think, a lot of these fights would probably main event in a normal arena on a Saturday night fight night, right?
Yeah, I'd agree. I'd say probably unless it was in Bournemouth, probably Billham Smith and Glanson is the only one I wouldn't put as a main event. But again, you put that in the Bournemouth International Centre, then you probably do main event it. But look, the card's going to kick off strong. It's going to be the British Cruiserweight title. And it's Chev Clark looking to bounce back from European heartache in Monaco just before Christmas, taking on Vidal Riley. Now, we'll call Vidal Riley a boxer. We won't call him an influencer boxer or anything like that. We know how upset he gets by it. Look, Chev Clark, if we're honest, that fight in Monaco, if you take out the first 6 minutes, he probably wins it on the scorecards. Now, I know you can't take out the first 6 minutes in boxing. That's happened. But he was good for 30 minutes and sloppy for 6. The step back down to British level will probably do him a world of good here. What do you think?
Completely agree. I actually was going to say, obviously we hadn't compared notes before this, but I said he got off to a slow start. It's a funny fight for me because I'll be honest, I've always been unconvinced by both. Alex, that I do the podcast with, he's always been a big advocate of Chev Clark, and I've never quite seen it myself. I've always thought from when he turned pro, he got caught very easily by some of the guys who probably weren't at the level that should be competing with Chev Clark with respect. I just felt like he was prone to getting caught and losing rounds. And I just didn't really see it. And you mentioned there the Vidal Riley thing. We spend a lot of time taking a piss out of people like Tommy Fury, and rightfully so, who's, cash grab, not good enough to fight in the proper ranks. And going off and fighting on misfits. So we can't really then throw it back at someone like Vidal Riley, who's given it a good go on the other side of the fence. Do you know what I mean? But I do think that Chev Clark comes into it in a big favourite. I really do. Got the amateur background compared to Vidal Riley. I know it doesn't always mean everything, but I make Chev a big favourite.
Yeah, look, let's touch on Vidal quickly. You are right. Look, to some people, he'll be known as the guy that trained KSI for his rematch with Logan Paul. To the likes of us, we've seen him chip away on boxer cards. And I don't mean that disrespectfully. He's made a conscious decision to become a full-time professional boxer. Yeah. And look, you've got to give him his flowers. He has committed to it. And this is the next step for him. Look, Dan Garber and Mikhail Laral are decent English level opponents. Yep. This is the next step now. And as I've said here, if he can win the British title, look, a lot of people are going to have to eat a bit of humble pie and start giving this man his flowers. Absolutely, aren't they?
Yeah, completely agree. And I'm not writing him off doing it either. It's a big stage. Yes, they're probably... Are we opening the show Saturday night? Is that right?
Yes, the first fight. So about 5:30, I reckon.
Yeah, so it's not exactly going to be full, is it? And it's a big step for Chev Clark to go and fight in a stadium off the back of a loss, albeit at a higher level. big pressure that, and Vidal tends to start quite well. I haven't seen an awful lot of him, just what we've been exposed to on Sky, but I'd say it's a 60-40 Chev, isn't it? I think, but he's definitely the favourite. Do you want a prediction?
Yeah, let's go, mate. Let's get into prediction. First fight of the night from the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium.
Yeah, I go Chev on points. I think it'll be very competitive. Maybe 8-4, something like that.
Okay, yeah, look, I agree. Chev is the favourite in this fight. I think the questions he'll have to address is, does he have any demons from that European title fight? Look, as we said, if you take out the first 6 minutes, he probably does win the fight. But he was lacklustre. He was sloppy. We did see more holes than we had seen at domestic level. I think he's going to look to make a statement. For me, Vidal Riley has potential to win a British title. It's just unfortunate that Chev Clark is the guy he's getting his first opportunity against. I think Chev, it may take him a few rounds to get into it. It may be similar to the Ellis Doro fight, but I think somewhere between round 7 to round 9, we'll see a Chev Clark stoppage.
Oh, really?
Which would be him right back on track.
Yeah.
I'm going for Chev for a stoppage, mate.
And I think that would be a good statement, because yes, we can throw whatever we want of Vidal Riley. He's never lost. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the progression of his opponents, you can see there's an evolution to that. So, like you said, he's fought at English level. So it's a funny sort of crossroads, really, because you've got him pressing into British from English, and then you've got Chev dropping back in from European. So it's a very interesting one.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. So we're going to move on to the second fight, which is staying with the cruiserweight theme, and it is Chris Smith taking on the American Brandon Glanton. Look, as I've said here, CBS for contender. For the first time since May of 2023, he's not going to be having the WBO world title belt attached to him. He lost it to Zurdo Ramirez in a unification fight, in a brutal, grueling fight. Obviously, we've all seen the photos of the state of his face and know the surgery he had after that fight. Look, all the right noises are coming out of CBS. All the right noises are coming out of Shane McGuigan, who, by the way, for me is the best trainer on these shores at the moment. Open to debate, but you can't fault what that man has done. Billum Smith almost... Look, he was never meant to win a British title, never meant to win a Commonwealth or European, and that's by his own admission. So he's always maximised his potential for years. The cruiserweight division is going to start to clear a path, isn't it? Zurdo looks like he's going to make a move up. Opataya will certainly be moving up. Billum Smith is probably the king of the rest, if that makes sense. He's not as good as those top two as we've seen, but I give him a good chance of picking up belts again. How do you see him, mate?
I listened to you with a smile on my face there. Like, I think he fast became one of my favourites, just because of the way he handled himself. There was very rarely any beef in the build up to any of his big fights, his world title fight, and his subsequent defences. But nothing would please me more to see him have another run. I don't know a lot about Glanton, I'll be honest. He's not seen on these shores very often, is he, or even televised? But a notable result on there was David Light, who obviously absolute stinker with Lawrence Okoli. So he's mixed it at the fringe levels, and I mean it's tough to say with Chris Billum Smith, isn't it? Because he's been in a division with some absolute monsters. He's been a victim of the time he's been boxing at times, I feel. But yeah, you are right. I mean, winning a British title was an unbelievable achievement for someone like Chris Billum Smith, who comes from the background. And let's be honest, location, Bournemouth hasn't been a sexy place for boxing, has it, over time? But he's made it quite sexy in, stadiums and arenas down there. So nothing would please me more to see him get back to winning ways and have another run.
Yeah, look, I am a big Billum Smith fan. I was at Selhurst Park for his fight with Riakpur last year.
Oh,
right?
Wow. Yeah.
I was in London on the day of the fight. My plans fell through. Was on my phone and saw £30 tickets left and thought, too good to be true. Went round to the box office at Palace. Had to make myself an account. So I've got a Crystal Palace membership. Don't judge me on that. But I got myself a ticket to get in there, which was, you know what? It was an interesting night for me, being surrounded by a load of Riakpur fans. So I kept myself to myself, pretty quiet. But you have to appreciate Billum Smith. Look, we'll touch on Brandon Glanton quickly. He, out of everyone on this card, can propel his name, his star quality, and his career to another level. Because as you've hinted at, he's not known on these shores. Respectfully, as I can be disrespectful, he's not well known in America either. No. You say David Light is the best name on his record. Of course, David Light ended up in a coma after the Okoli fight. We're glad he's recovering now, and obviously we'll never see him box again. However, a lot of noise from, I mean, I watched his interview done earlier today. He's a man of few words, which is very unusual for Americans, especially underdogs. They're normally brash and cocky and like to have a lot to say.
Yeah.
If CBS, it's an old cliche, isn't it? If CBS has climbed a mountain, he's sort of got one eye on what he's going to do outside of his career. A hungry fighter in Glanton could make a huge statement, couldn't they, on Saturday?
On a pay-per-view card in Britain, like, yeah, definitely. I mean, obviously we'll get onto the main event, but that's what's caught the imagination and is going to get the casual viewers in. So when people are settled in for 6:30, when these guys are coming out, big opportunity. It really is. And I think, I mean, it's the first time I've actually seen him in person on TV today with regards to the size difference with the grand arrivals in the last hour or so. He's considerably smaller than Billam Smith. And, you know, Billam Smith needs to be careful about that, I feel, because, yes, he will have trained for this guy, but I can't think of too many smaller guys that he's been in with in that division in recent times. Can you?
The last one I think of is Zerdo Ramirez, and look what Zerdo done to him. Zerdo, remember, 175 from his time losing to Bivol, obviously a few years ago now. So, yeah, I agree, mate. Look, it's a division full of killers. Billam Smith has kind of been a victim of the time he's in it, as you said. Yeah. But there's light at the end of the tunnel. Those boys are clearing off, and he's definitely well placed to become a king ruler again. So, second fight of the night, mate. How do you see Chris Billam Smith and Brandon Glanton going?
I'm a bit torn on this one. I'd like to think Billam Smith would get a stoppage, but I am going to stick my neck on points again, I think. Chris Billam Smith on points.
Yeah, look, I'm going to be really honest. I think Chris needs to box his way to a points victory. He probably needs to get 12 rounds underneath his feet again, boxing the McGuigan way, probably having a few moments in the fight where it's a bit hairy, but a good solid 12 rounds is what he needs, because in this cruiserweight division, look, everyone is so good and such a killer that you're very unlikely to blow people away. So he'll probably be quite happy to go 12 rounds. I think a wide 117, 111 points victory kind of style for Chris Billam Smith.
Says on back, doesn't it?
Yeah, settles him back. It moves him in. And it also proves that he's a level above, say, the Chev Clarks and Vidal Rileys that we're talking about in the fight before. Like a good, convincing points win, or even a late stoppage does that for me. So we're done with the cruiserweights, mate. We're going to move down to a lighter division now. I think this is going to be at 154. It's Liam Beefy Smith and Aaron McKenna. Look, Beefy's career is one of Canelo, of Jaime Munguia, of Chris Eubank Jr. twice. It's sort of some fantastic names, and he's got some victories in this as well. And look, gave very good accounts of himself as well in the cases of Munguia and Canelo. But inactive since the rematch with Eubank Jr., which was in September of 2023, was meant to fight on another card, which is on the Wembley card against
Josh Kelly.
Josh Kelly, pulled out the week before the fight. Look, I'm a big Beefy fan. I'm a big fan of all the Smith brothers, but you've got to ask the question, does he have it in him for one more big night under those bright lights?
I think so. I think you have to give him a benefit of doubt because he's answered these questions before. I feel like after the Canelo fight, he's going in. Do you remember when he fought Anthony Fowler a couple of years ago? I think everyone thought he was done before then, and he was coming down in level to fight Anthony Fowler, and that sort of, he went on a bit of a run then, didn't he? Coinciding with the Eubank win. I think we have to take him at value about being injured before the rematch. If we can look at Eubank, how well he performed, you have to look also at why Smith was so off it, and I think the weight did kill him, which is ironic really because of the weight they're fighting at this weekend, you know. But I think he'll have too much experience in this one, unless he's absolutely washed in 18 months inactivity, like you say. I feel like he'll have too much. McKenna, yes, great record, but he hasn't had that level of test yet, has he?
Yeah. Look, let's just touch on Beefy again for a minute. Look, you said it yourself, the irony of him struggling with the weight in the Eubank Jr. rematch. But as he said himself, and he has no reason to come out and say this because people will throw all sorts of shade at him, but he had managed 2 spars that entire training camp because of injury. A lot of the weight was still coming off on the morning with the weigh-in. Look, I know fighters do that, but he was talking about still having to do the bulk of his weight cut on weigh-in morning. The fact that he got to that stage and didn't pull out of the rematch a second time, you've got to give credit to him for. But he's given us some great nights. Like you say, Anthony Fowler, the first Eubank fight, I was delighted when he beat Eubank, I'll be very honest. Jesse Vargas on the first Casey Taylor and Serrano card, that was meant to be him going over to America as a British name. But look at the performance he had that night. Sam Egginton, the 2 fights with Liam Williams, when he was still on his way back after the Canelo loss. He's always delivered. He's always stepped up. It's some career, mate. He's worked with Frank Warren, Eddie Hearn, boxer, Eddie Hearn. He's been around the block, shall we say, Beefy. But let's touch on the Irishman, McKenna. Look, it's his time, isn't it? If he can win on Saturday, he's bursting into the big time, which is where a lot of people think this man deserves to be. My question is stepping up from where he's been, mixing it in 8 and 10 rounders, well, only one 10 rounder in his career. Is this a step too soon? I mean, if Beefy does even have half of his potential left, he's probably going to be able to put a bit of a lesson on Aaron McKenna, isn't he?
I think so. I think it's a very similar jump to what Anthony Fowler made. In my opinion, albeit Anthony Fowler had probably been seen a bit more on TV than McKenna, I would say. That's the gap I would liken it to. For me, Liam Smith is the sure thing of the night. Bar one other, which we'll get onto. But of all the competitive fights that are billed as 50-50s on paper, I think Liam Smith is my pick, really. I just think McKenna, good fighter, but he's got so many years ahead of him. And you just listed a load of names there that Smith has been in with, win, lose or draw, big stadium fights. He's been to America, upset people. I struggle to see past him. I really do. And that's nothing against McKenna because he's a good fighter.
No, of course not. So, look, I think I know which way you're leaning with this, but give us your official prediction for this one, mate.
I'm going to go Liam Smith, late stoppage. Maybe championship rounds.
Liam Smith, late stoppage. Okay, look, I agree with you. I think McKenna undoubtedly has talent. He undoubtedly has the potential to go on to beat some big names, but I just question if this is one fight too soon for him, if that makes sense. I think to go straight in from the level he's been at to this level is a big risk. Yes, you can say what you like about Beefy being towards the end of his career. He's been out of the ring for 18, 19 months. But you write Liam Smith off, he delivers. Jesse Vargas, Anthony Fowler to an extent, the first Eubank fight. I just think he's got one more night. Spurred on by what Callum done out in Riyadh, also in February when he was an underdog against Buatsi. That family, that momentum, that Josh McNally and Declan O'Rourke partnership, which I'm another massive fan of. I don't think he'll get a stoppage. I think he'll be quite happy going the distance, but a comfortable points victory. Probably, again, an 8 rounds to 4, 7 rounds to 3, maybe even wider for that one, mate.
It's going to be a late night, this, isn't it?
it is, mate. With that curfew, it's going to be an early start. Look, 3 fights down. We're going to move on to the co-main event. It is, as I joked about at the top of the show, the trilogy we didn't know we needed. It is Anthony, Lions in the Stadium Yard, and Lyndon. Am I still the King Arthur? Going at it for a third time. Look, it's 1-1 in this trilogy, so it makes sense. However, do we really want to see it? Before we talk about the 2 boxers, do we really want to be seeing this fight?
No. It's. I know. You build it as. What did you say? The trilogy that
no one knew they needed.
The trilogy that nobody needed, mate. That's where I'm at with it. I don't know if you saw it today. I put a tweet out about Anthony Yard today. His career is so weird. Like he's fought at the very, very top, against Beterbiev and Kovalev. And then he's fought Yard a couple of times. And anything other than that has been absolute bog standard opposition. Mainly Anthony Yard versus TBA because it's announced on fight week. Such a strange career. Yeah, TBA is his most common opponent. It's been a strange career. But keeps getting these opportunities. Is always an exciting fighter to watch. It was 2.5 years ago that he beat Arthur in the rematch, and he absolutely blasted through him, didn't he, in a couple of rounds? So I know Lyndon Arthur's gone on and had some good wins since then. Fought at that elite level against Bivol. Got beat. I mean, it was a shutout of all shutouts, wasn't it? Yard probably dealt with that top level opposition a bit better. But yeah, how do you see things going?
Look, like you've just said, Anthony Yard to start with has the strangest career known to man. So the only times his opponents have been known in advance were both times against Lyndon Arthur, all 3 times against Lyndon Arthur, Kovalev, Beterbiev. And, you know, you can say we're taking the piss, but that's the reality. I went to the Beterbiev fight a couple of years ago.
Me too, yeah.
And I went because I wanted to see a pound-for-pound top 5 fighter. The fact that Anthony Yard fought so well that night and I could see him winning, I think shows the potential he's got. Ultimately, he came up short to one of the best 175-pounders we're ever going to see in Artur Beterbiev, but he gave a fantastic account of himself. But then at the same time, the first fight against Lyndon Arthur, really strange tactics. His fight at the Copper Box in October, he looked like he didn't care. I've always been a big advocate of him moving away from Tunde and maybe going with a Joe McNally, a Andy Lee, a Shane McGuigan, Adam Booth, anyone like that. But he's always stayed there. Look, I think Yard has enough still on Saturday. I think he's got more left than Arthur, but I really don't know how I feel about it. So let's touch on Arthur. Look, he calls himself King Arthur, Arthur the Great. I mean, what does he have left? Because let's call it for what it was. That Bivol performance, after 4 or 5 rounds, he looked like he didn't want to be there. He looked quite happy to just survive to 36 minutes. Or am I being a bit unfair in that assessment?
I don't think it's unfair. I just felt he was out of his depth. I really do. But it was one of those. It was a Saudi. It was on Saudi show, wasn't it? It was a Saudi call.
Day of Reckoning. So the very first one.
Yeah. So Saudi call. What's he going to say? Do you know what I mean? He's been IBO champion, hasn't he? Lyndon Arthur. So why on earth would you not take the Bivol fight? Like it's anyone would take that. You'd be stupid not to. So, but I think in the end it was 120-107 times 3, wasn't it? So as convincing as you can get beat without getting stopped. I mentioned it before. At the top level, Anthony Yard has performed better than Lyndon Arthur. His win over Arthur was way more conclusive than Lyndon's, so you would have to go with Yard. But I would put an asterisk next to Lyndon Arthur's win as well. Remember, it was behind closed doors. So it was, during a period where I think it was the same night that Daniel Dubois lost to Joe Joyce.
It's the week after. They done 2 shows, didn't they? Inside the Westminster Hall.
Period. Yeah. So very, very strange that was. But yeah, so conclusive in the second fight. So I think we probably know where this prediction's heading. But do you want to go first on this one, mate?
Yeah, go on. Look, I mean, we know what we're going to get with Yard. There's going to be plenty of calls of lions in the camp. Tundai's going to tell him he's got the heart of a lion, that he can do this and that, and it's going to do everyone's head in. I'll be glad to be on a watch along and watching it on mute. But Anthony Yard does have skills. He does have talent. He's just never utilised it enough. I think this is an emphatic stoppage, probably within the first 4 or 5 rounds. I think Yard's going to look to come out and make a real statement, close this chapter definitively in his career. So Anthony Yard to win inside the first 5 rounds. What's your prediction, mate?
Yeah, I was going to say within 6. So very similar actually. I feel that you always see the best Anthony Yard when he's in front of a crowd with a decent opponent in front of him. 2 of his best performances of his career have actually been in losses, which is strange. I would regard that the Kovalev and Beterbiev losses, and when he blasted Lyndon Arthur away. I feel he'll do it again, and I think within 6 rounds. 6 rounds.
Yeah, look, we don't need to say any more about that. It's as a co-main event. It's interesting. I think that's where we're going to go with that. But look, it's going to settle a trilogy, barring a draw. It's going to settle a trilogy, and that's what it's been sold on. So good luck to both men, and hopefully we get some sort of spectacle. But look, I know you're itching to talk about this main event. Just before we go on, you don't have any eggs on your person, do you? You're all good? No eggs?
No, I'm only joking. No.
We're all good. Perfect. So here we go. So look, 934 days later than originally billed. Eubank Jr. and Ben, I've called it the ultimate dance because that's what it's being sold at. Before I let you loose, because I know your opinions and look forward to hearing them, I'm going to be very honest. When this fight was first announced, so it was meant to be in October of 2023, 2022.
Yeah, 22, yeah.
I had zero interest in it, mate. I had mates going that brought tickets that when I said no, couldn't believe I was saying no. Yes, it got called off on the Wednesday of fight week. I'm normally buying my pay-per-views quite early. I'm normally, as soon as they're live, buying them. I wasn't going to buy my pay-per-view until the day of the fight, more begrudgingly out of anything, because I didn't think we needed to see the fight. The fact it got called off and everything that's happened since is an absolute mess. It's an absolute stain on boxing in general. However, we are here. We are guessing this fight. And there's a level of intrigue there. That's all I'm going to say for now. So give me your overall view on the fiasco, shall we say, first, before we break down both fighters.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I would say is a lot of people say, why do you hate Connor Benn so much? I don't hate Connor Benn. I just hate drugs cheats. And like, I will never, ever sort of refrain from that. Dennis McCann's having it when he comes out as well. Like, some people think, oh, it's just Connor Benn, but I had a ticket for the first fight. I was very much looking forward to it, and I remember my mate Dale text me. I think it was on Wednesday. Was it a fight week? The open workouts. And
Tuesday. Sorry, mate. Tuesday it came out. Wednesday the fight was pulled. So yeah, it was.
Yeah. Cool. So early in the week, and I had a text saying Connor Benn's popped. I went, fuck off, no way. There's no way. I looked into, obviously straight away the news was out. I just feel the casual market has definitely bought into the fact that Connor Benn popped, and now this fight is now a stadium fight. They're making millions more, and it just stinks because it's all off the back of Connor Benn failing 2 drugs tests and never explaining how that shit was in his system to this very day. The British Boxing Board of Control, I actually admired them so much because they really dug their heels in on this about Connor Benn having a license. No, he has to prove how it was in his system. There was talk about this massive fucking document that went missing that they never got to see, hearings that didn't happen, and then suddenly, as soon as Saudi Arabia are involved, got a bit of money to chuck at it. Guess who ended up with a boxing border control license for this fight?
Yeah, look, you've just covered it perfectly, and I know from speaking to you previously that you have this narrative with everyone that pops hot in boxing. I would imagine your opinions on the fact Jarrell Miller's fighting one of my favourite fighters in Fabio Wardley. I mean,
the worst, yeah.
Yeah, I want to go to that fight, but the fact it's Jarrell Miller, I don't want to give the money. I mean, I'm in Ipswich, so Wardley is my local fighter. But anyway, let's focus on this one. Let's start with Eubank Jr. first. Look, it's a 36-year-old man still calling himself the next generation. I'm going to move away from that one. I'm going to go with his time is possibly past. His best days are more than likely behind him. Camille Serra-Messa was his last opponent on October the 12th. I wasn't impressed. And yes, he got a stoppage, but let's be really honest. He got a stoppage more because Serra-Messa had enough as opposed to anything Eubank Jr. had done.
Yeah.
So the question I'm asking here, and probably why I'm more intrigued by this fight in 2025 than I was in 2022, is Eubank on his way down the hill now?
Yes, I would say so. Probably has been for 18 months, 2 years, I would say. It's hard to say when he peaked, really. I mean, De Gale maybe. But again, De Gale was on the decline at that stage. But yeah, funny one. I'm definitely not one to say Chris Eubank has ever been the best in his division or, an elite fighter in any of the weights he's competed at over the years. I just feel that at this moment in time, the level of opposition he's been up against, the wins he has had at that level, significantly dwarfs what Connor Benn has done. The lack of a British title, English title, area title, European title, nothing to make me think that he would struggle against a career welterweight at the moment.
Yeah, look, I think you talk about Eubank's best era. I actually think it was the Eubank at the time of the World Boxing Super Series. So he beat, Yildirim, didn't he? Yes, he lost to Groves, but he was the most competitive I've seen him against the peak fighter was against George Groves.
I was at that fight. He was the chin on Eubank that night was incredible.
Yeah, phenomenal. Yes, he got beat. I'm not saying for 1 second anyone that he beat George Groves, but it's the best we've seen him look against an elite level fighter. And then he had that strange fight on the undercard of the final against JJ Madonna, who was more interested in fighting him after the fight than before. And then he went into the Groves fight. So I actually think his best era was during that World Boxing Super Series. But look, World Boxing Super Series, the Groves fight was 2019. The Yildirim fight was 2018. We're talking about 6-7 years ago.
Yeah.
So that is where my concern is with him. He's fluctuated around in weight so much. We saw him beat Liam Smith, who, you know, in his pomp, probably Eubank would have dealt with comfortably. So there is questions to answer. I'm going to move on to Connor Benn. Look, his nickname's the Destroyer. He's calling himself the New Destroyer now. That may just be something Turkey's chucking money because they're both playing around with their monikers for this fight. Is he too young? Is he too fresh? Is he too hungry? That is the questions I'm asking. And you do wonder, look, everyone can have their opinions. And Connor Benn, we're probably never going to know fully what happened with how he ended up failing 2 drugs tests. We're probably never going to know where the 2,500-page document ever went. But a 27-year-old man now in this ring against Chris Eubank Jr., let's just strip this back for a second. If this was a 27-year-old against a 36-year-old in any other division, you'd be leaning towards the 27-year-old because they're younger, they're fresher, they're hungrier. Is that a fair argument, would you say?
If they were the same weight, yes. I think if they were both welterweights or both middleweights, I would significantly be favouring Benn this weekend. I just feel he's got a big bridge to gap. Gap to bridge rather. I just feel that middleweight. I mean, you look at the elite level. I'm not comparing it to this fight, but you look at Kell Brook when Kell Brook stepped up to middleweight against Golovkin. You know, Kell Brook, powerful welterweight. It didn't really hurt Golovkin, did he? And I know this is different levels, but it's the same jumping weight. We'll get onto probably the weight in a minute, but I feel last time Benn probably had a better chance in hindsight than this time. The reason I say that is because at the time Benn obviously was knocking everybody out. Little did we know potentially the reason for that. Eubank was being drained to 157 at the time, which I thought was absolutely criminal. Really, he agreed to it, fair enough, but I felt that was bad. And then in hindsight since, looking back and thinking this guy was on PEDs trying to take out a weight drained, I don't think he did 157 since like he was 18 or something, Eubank. That was really dangerous. Yeah, that was really dangerous. So, but this time I think, yes, there's a rehydration clause, but I think it's a lot healthier for Eubank. But where's Connor Benn's power gone ever since he popped? So we haven't really seen that yet. So this time I have a very different view on how things can pan out to the original, I think.
It's a question about that Tony Sims gym in general. I mean, Joe Cordina lost his world title belt. Look, we're not going to drag that gym's name through the mud at all. I do have a lot of respect for Tony Smith, and one of my first favourite fighters was Darren Barker. His story, beating Darren Gill, etc., etc. So we're not going to slander that gym at all. I actually give Connor Benn more of a chance this time round than the first time. Very, very simply, I'll explain. Eubank Jr. is older, more miles on the clock. We've seen him dropped and stopped for the first time in his career, which we hadn't had prior to when they were meant to box in October of 2022. Yes, Connor Benn has a lot of questions to answer. Yes, the evidence shows that when he had PEDs in his system, he was knocking out Chris Van Heerden, Chris Algieri, Samuel Vargas, etc., etc. And he struggled with Pistol Pete Dobson and the other opponent whose name slips my mind in his 2 fights since. But there's something to be said for a younger fighter. And I actually think because he's had so much time off, it's not like he's just had one fight, agreed to this one, and is having to put on the weight. Kell Brook, remember, was in camp for a unification at 147 when Eubank Jr. lost his pen against Golovkin. Eddie called him and said, you're never gonna guess what Eubank's done. And he said without any hesitation, yeah, I'll step up. But he then only had 9 weeks to bulk up because he was in training camp down at 147. Connor Benn's had a long time to do this. I think he's done it properly, but we're not going to know till the first bell goes. I will say this. Connor Benn needs to start fast. If Chris Eubank Jr. is still standing there, say come round number 7, and he's not cut, he hasn't been dropped, and he's not blowing, then I think he'll take over. But I'm excited, mate. Look, it's a sham, but has it brought in the casuals? Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah.
Are we come 8-10 o'clock on Saturday when the strains of Dr. Dre are playing out around Tottenham Hotspur Stadium going to be giddy? Yes, we are, because we are fight fans and we enjoy seeing the bright light shining for these fighters. Anything else you want to say before we get into a prediction?
No, all good. I think you've summed it up really well there. The intrigue is always there. You don't have to like it. For me, it's sort of just always been off the back of the failed test, like how a fight can become bigger off the back of someone popping. It'll always leave a bitter taste in my mouth. But look, it is what it is. We are where we are. It's a big one Saturday night, and I am looking forward to it. I think for me, I'll keep calling it Operation Greater Good, but Eubank wins. That's not a prediction yet, but would you like to go first?
Yeah, just quickly on what you've just said. Look, I think for the first time in his career, Chris Eubank Jr. might actually be seen as the good guy. I mean, think how often is Chris Eubank Jr. booed into an arena, booed into a stadium? It doesn't matter. That man is always booed. I think the last time he wasn't booed was when he fought Spike O'Sullivan back in 2015, and the build-up to that fight was also fantastic on the Joshua White pay-per-view.
And he's clean.
And he's clean. Yes, there is that as well. He is the clean fighter in this one. Look, I will go first, mate. For the reasons I've given and the fact that this fight is in 2025, not 2022, my prediction has changed. First time rounds, I favoured Eubank Jr. Yes, I was worried about the fact he's been drawn down in weight, but at that time, we hadn't seen any real signs of decline. We hadn't really seen, we hadn't seen his chin properly cracked like we did against Liam Smith. We hadn't seen a bit of his aura that he's always had start to crack, which we have seen now. So whereas I would have favoured him to win on points the first time round, I'm actually thinking a Connor Benn stoppage this time, which I don't like myself a lot for saying for all the reasons we shared on this show. But I think Connor Benn by stoppage in round number 7. I do think he's younger, fresher, and a bit hungrier at this point. Eubank Jr., regardless of what he says, has already achieved a lot of fame, notoriety, and money in this sport. 3-time IBO world champion for what that's worth, a WBA interim world title. He has reached the pinnacle. Connor Benn still wants to get there, and I think that's going to be a big thing in this fight, mate. So my prediction, Connor Benn, round 7 stoppage.
Interesting. Yeah, I am going to disagree. I am going to, and this isn't through the Connor Benn thing. I do think Connor Benn will come out really quick and may take rounds early doors. But you made a point earlier about if Eubank can weather the bull in a china shop early storm, I feel Ben could tire himself out. Eubank definitely has one of the things he does certainly have is his engine, very, very fit. And I feel, if it does go beyond the 6 and 7 that you sort of predicted around that stage, I feel Eubank could take over. And he will always win rounds. He's always won rounds against anybody he's boxed against, let alone a blown up middleweight. So blown up welterweight, beg your pardon. So I'm going to go with Eubank on points. I don't think he'll stop Ben because Ben's tough, isn't he? But I'll go Eubank on points.
Yeah, look, I will say this. The later the fight goes, the more it's going to favour the naturally bigger man, the man that's got more experience going 12 rounds. It's just, can Eubank get it that far? Can he keep Connor Benn off of him in the first half of the fight when he is going to be hungry, when he is going to be fighting like the whole world hates him, which I'd say maybe 40% of the world probably does at this point. It's a fascinating fight. I'm more intrigued, as I said, 3 or 4 times now than I was back in 2022. And come Saturday, we're going to have an answer. As Eddie Hearn said in his post-night interview from Sheffield on Saturday, whether Connor Benn wins or Connor Benn loses, I'm going to be out here smiling, happy, and giving an interview because we finally got this fight done. This chapter for everyone is over. I mean, Chris Eubank Jr. was a Wasserman fighter when this fight was meant to happen. Now he's with Ben Shalom and Boxer, which shows the only promoter in boxing he trusts by all accounts. So it just says everything you need to know. But that is where we're going to leave this show. Look, we could talk about this all night, but we all have other things to be getting on with, and I'm sure people have had enough of listening to our voices. But I hope you've enjoyed the show, everyone. Before I go, Rob, I always allow my guests to give their handles on social media so people can drop them a follow. So please let the people know.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It's at Boxing Shrew, BOXINGSHREW.
Yeah, this man needs a follow. His beloved Shrewsbury being relegated over the Easter weekend, so he needs some followers to cheer him up. I had to, mate. I've done well 40 minutes, but I had to bring it up. But no, thank you very much for coming on, mate. To everyone watching, if you're not following Rob, if you're not following myself, please drop us a follow on X. Follow Jay's Fight Talk. for more boxing content, including Straight Talk every Thursday night with myself and the main man, JFT. Next weekend, we're going to be covering Times Square, we're going to be covering Riyadh, and we're going to be covering Vegas. It's a mad bank holiday weekend, and I cannot wait to get into it. As always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again next time.